Good morning, Good News Chapel. So good to be with you. We are right in the heart of the season of Lent, just about 2 weeks now until Easter. And the whole kind of invitation of these days, these 40 days leading up to Easter, is this idea of walking with Jesus to the cross. Now, for myself, I wasn't raised in church. Certainly wasn't raised, and when I was saved, it wasn't in any kind of liturgical church that ever observed a church calendar or even talked about Lent. So I'm still kind of new to this, and since the time I've heard about it, I've always kind of wondered, what does that mean? What does it mean to walk with Jesus to the cross? And my prayer for today is that as we look at today's text, is that by the end, maybe we'll be able to answer that a little bit and to really feel, what is this invitation of Lent? We're picking up again in the discourse in John 10, the discourse of the Good Shepherd. It's kind of this rather long speech Jesus gives about him being the Good Shepherd and what that means about who he is in his own person, but also in what he's come to do. We're going to backtrack a little bit on a few verses we looked at last week and move ahead as well. So we'll be in John 10, verses 14 through 18. And Jesus says this: I am the Good Shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. So we're mostly this morning going to look just at those last two verses, verses 17 and 18. In verse 17, Jesus says, for this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. And so the question is, well, what reason is he talking about? For what reason does the Father love him? And that, you got to go back to verse 16. It's what we looked at last time, is the verse where Jesus says he has other sheep that are not of this fold, and he must bring them also. The reason is God's plan for the redemption of all nations, which goes all the way back to his promise to Abraham in Genesis 12. It's the theme that's throughout the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, that God's got a global vision for the redemption of all mankind, of all nations, of all peoples, to come under to become one family, to become one church, under one shepherd, under his son Jesus. That's God's big redemptive plan that is throughout the Bible. And Jesus is saying, for that reason, for that heart, God has this compassionate heart to want to gather all peoples for the glory of his Son, to be redeemed and to be invited into the intimacy of fellowship that we were always created to have. And so Jesus says it's for that reason. It's that reason why the Father loves me and why I lay down my life and take it up again. It's important though to understand, what does that mean? That it's not trying to say that the Father's love for the Son is dependent on Jesus doing anything. God's love has always been strong and full and complete for his Son. But what it is trying to say is that by Jesus willingly giving himself, his life, dying for the sake of the redemption of all peoples, in essence gives full expression. And it's from that obedient, humble sacrifice that the love between the Father and Son is able to flow forth. Let me give an example. Imagine there's a single parent. I grew up in a single parent home, so this connects with me in a lot of ways. But if there's a single parent and she has to work a lot, and she's driving home one night and she has two kids at home, an older son and a younger son. And on the way home, she realizes, it's been a long day, she's exhausted, but she still has to go home and think about making something for dinner. Also, the house, she knows, is a mess, and so their apartment's a mess, so they're going to have to clean up the apartment. And also, her younger son has really been struggling with math, so she's going to need to take some time as well to go over his homework with him. So that's just kind of the life of a single parent. It's all up to one person. And so she comes home, and when she walks in the door, to her surprise, she first discovers that the apartment's perfectly clean. Everything's been picked up and vacuumed, and everything looks in its place and tidy. Secondly, she notices that on the stove in the kitchen, there's a hot meal of spaghetti being warmed up on the stove, waiting for her. And thirdly, she notices that her oldest son is sitting with their younger son at the kitchen table, and he's helping him do his homework. Now, of course, she's just overjoyed. What makes it so special, of course, is that the oldest son, did all the work, even though nobody asked him to, and he wasn't compelled, he wasn't forced, he wasn't bribed, but rather out of his own free will. His own free will, the oldest son chose to deny his own plans and comforts for the evening, and instead put the needs of his mother, of others, before his own. He could have easily taken the evening, shut himself in his room and played video games, done his own homework, talked online with friends, whatever. But he willingly set aside all that stuff, said, I'm going to die to doing my own thing, and instead I'm going to go and be obedient to the heart of my mother and do my parents' will. Instead, he put the redemptive desires of his parent for their home before his own selfish preferences of just locking himself in his room. And so when she walks in, the oldest son stands up and says, "Welcome home, Mom." And of course, the parent is overjoyed with a huge smile and just embraces her son, which brings a smile to everyone's face. Now, to be clear, the mother loved the son before she ever got home. The mother has always loved the son, and the son has loved the mother. That has not changed. But it's the humble sacrifice that the son took to work in harmony with her heart that brings kind of a crescendo, an explosion to their experience of love. The love's always been there, but it's at that moment when he is willing to set aside his own preferences and be obedient and to serve the heart of the mother, which is for the redemption of their home, that just brings a swelling up of love. It seems to bring it to flow forth. It brings it to fruition. And I think that's kind of what's going on in this passage in John with Jesus and the Father. The Father has always loved the Son. Even if you go back to the baptism, you hear the voice at the Jordan River. It said, "This is my Son in whom I am well pleased." Father's well pleased in his Son before he does anything of redemption. And so Jesus, by saying, "For this reason, that I lay down my life, that the Father loves me because I lay down my life and take it up again." That the Son, Jesus, is willing and humbles himself to die in order to partner with the Father in the work of redeeming all peoples. And it's this act of obedience that draws forth the full expression of love between the Father and the Son. This is the family business. The Father, his heart is a heart of compassion, that all peoples of all nations would come and know his Son and be redeemed and be restored again to the intimacy and the fullness of life that we are always intended to have, but which sin and rebellion has gotten in the way of. And so Jesus, as the Son, willingly, he's not forced, he's not threatened by his own, but rather by his own authority and his own volition, he lays down his life and he will pick it up again in order to fill the desires of the Father's heart. The Father says that I want to redeem them. They need a sacrifice, and they need a perfect sacrifice. They need one without sin. I can imagine the conversation in heaven before Jesus comes to earth. And the Father turns to the Son and says, "Now, Son, you know what they're going to do to you, right?" And the Son says, "Yes, Father." And the Father says, "Well, you sure you want to go? You're going to be misunderstood. You're going to be slandered. You're going to be mocked. You're going to be disbelieved. You're going to be lied to. You're going to be betrayed. You're going to be arrested. You're going to be beaten. You're going to be tortured. You're going to be mocked. You'll be spit upon. You'll be cursed. And ultimately, you're going to be humiliated with a public execution. Are you sure you want to go?" And the Son says, "Father, I know how much they mean to you. And because I love you and I know you long for all of us to be gathered again into that intimacy that we were all designed for, I will go. Yes, I will go." I like it in Hebrews 12. The author of Hebrews 12, 1 and 2 says, "And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. It's interesting, it says there, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. Notice the cross itself is not joyful. Jesus didn't look at the cross and say, oh, I can't wait. Remember, he prays to have that cup pass from him. The cross is not the joy, but it's what he sees beyond the cross, what the cross is going to win, what it's going to open up, the redemption that it's going to bring about, and the joy that it's going to bring to his Father. Jesus looks ahead and sees the redemption of all things that's going to come through his obedience to that. It's a resurrection and gathering of all peoples redeemed into the restored fellowship with the Father forever. And it's that joy of shared harmony of purpose with the Father that lets the love flow between them. Now, I think the question is why Jesus is telling these things. And it's clear that as he's speaking to his disciples here in John 10, that he's preparing his disciples for what's going to happen in the rather near future to him. That there is going to come a time where he will be killed, but he will also rise again, and that this death and resurrection will bring about an ingathering of all nations. But it's more than just that Jesus is preparing them for what's going to happen to him himself. Jesus is not only preparing the disciples for what's going to happen to him, his death and his resurrection, but he's also preparing for what will happen to all those who choose to follow him. In the same way Jesus goes to the cross, so we have to go to our own cross. I like this quote from a great writer named Dallas Willard. He says this: Jesus didn't die on the cross so that we don't have to. He died on the cross so that we may join him there. In the same way that Jesus will experience life through death, so is it required that all who would follow him will find life through death, through a kind of death. In Luke 9, verses 23 and 24, Jesus says, "Then he said to them all, 'Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it.'" The only way to experience the abundant, flourishing life that Jesus promises is to learn to deny ourselves, to take up our cross, and to die daily. What does that mean? Well, this may not involve a literal death as a martyr, although it might, and in many parts of the world it certainly does. Most of the time, what this means is dying to all parts of my life that get in the way of becoming the loving person that God aims for us to be. Remember, the Father's heart is one of compassion to reach all peoples. And Jesus is willing to set aside his own preferences to say, God, I want to be on your story. I want to deny my story and be a part of your story of love and of redemption, and to work in harmony with you in there. And the same invitation is true for all of us. But it means dying to our old self. It means dying to my own self-centeredness. It means dying to my own story, saying, I just want to live for me. And to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to die to that and deny my own desires for my life and say, God, I want to do your story with my life. To join God in his heart of compassion for all peoples will require that I daily die to my own selfishness. Now, you might think is that hard to die to yourself, but the more light that Christ shines into you, the more you will see the depth of your own selfishness and how entrenched we are in having life go our own way. And that really is, I think, the issue, is that I may present myself a certain way, but really underneath the surface, I want control over my life. I want to be the captain of my own ship, and I want things to go my own way. I want to write my own story. I want to call the shots. I want to be in control. But the truth is, life doesn't always go the way we plan, does it? Many times there's curveballs, things that come sideways, things that we weren't expecting that happen, health issues, family members that pass, economic things, losing a job, a broken marriage, wayward children, things that we don't expect, and it kind of puts a wrench into our own plans. And it can be really disorienting. The question is, can I trust the Lord? Can I trust that the Lord is good even when life doesn't go the way I want? Am I willing to die to my own preferences in my own control of my life, to get out of the driver's seat, move aside, and say, Jesus, you take the wheel. I want you to be at the center of my life and of my heart, and I want to do life your way and trust your story, trust you to write my life now. I'm unable to manage my life. I'm unable. And I'm trusting, Lord, that by following you, I will find real life. For even when I do try to manage my own life, even when at the times when I do perhaps get everything I've ever wanted, it still doesn't bring joy. It still doesn't bring fullness. But true abundant life comes only when we're willing to die to ourselves and be born again into God's story. There's no other way to growth. There's no shortcut around the cross. The way to life is through death. It's true for Jesus, and it's true for us. Now, to be clear, to say that we deny ourselves or die to ourselves is not a dying to, this is a dying to self, not a dying of self. To die to yourself doesn't mean you lose your individuality. It doesn't mean you lose your beautiful distinctiveness, all the things that God has made you when he knit you together in the womb. He made you, you're fearfully and wonderfully and uniquely made for exactly who God wanted you to be. And he loves our distinctiveness. He loves our diversity. And he wants us to hold on to all that. That's not what we die to. In fact, that's what we really get to come alive to for the first time through Christ. But we do die. It's dying of having me be at the center of my life, dying to self-centeredness, and instead allowing God to be at the center. I die to my own story of life, willing to lay it down because I am so loved by my Heavenly Father. And here I can come alive to a new story, to God's story, which is all about loving and serving others. The Bible kind of describes two different kinds of death. The first death is a tragic death. It's the death of a hardened heart. The more you live by the desires of your own flesh and refuse to humble yourself before the kindness and authority of God, the more your heart will grow hard over time. You may still breathe for a time and have blood running through your veins, but you're basically a dead man walking or a dead woman walking. You may get everything you've ever wanted, that you've pursued and driven to have all the success that you thought you needed in order to be happy, but in the end it will leave you empty and alone. And it's a death that is tragic. The other kind of death the Bible talks about is a good death. It doesn't mean it's not painful. It is. But it's a death to recognize my self-centeredness and ask God for mercy to help me die to that old self and be born anew as a new creation with new desires and into a new story for my life. I think of it a lot of times when, remember when Jesus turns water into wine and he says, you can't pour new wine into old wineskins because it'll burst them. And that's kind of how I feel. As Jesus pours new wine into me, the new awareness of the gospel and of the goodness of his grace and of his plans, it kind of tears to shreds the old plans that I've had. They just can't hold on to all this goodness anymore. It needs a new container. And that's kind of how I think it. It needs a new story. And that's what God is inviting us into, is a whole new story of our lives, a story that's connected to his story, of what he's doing in the redemption of all peoples and to join him. And at first, while it may seem scary to say to die to myself, I feel like, am I going to die to all joy and fun? And I'm just going to hold on to my old dreams instead. But remember, those old dreams, they aren't really providing joy. And so while it's scary to ask God in to take control of my life, to manage my life, what we find when we do is that it's the actual path to real life. We have to die in order to live. And when we do die, we discover a fullness of life in God. We discover a heart that beats in harmony with God, and is in that harmony is a new experience of joy we've never been able to have in our own story. This last 2 weeks of Lent and Holy Week, as I mentioned at the beginning, is often framed in the idea of walking with Jesus to the cross. And it's as he draws near to the cross and we walk with him, it awakens our heart of compassion within us. As we ponder and meditate upon all that Jesus gave up, all that he was willing to set aside, all that he was able to empty himself in order to become a servant, it says in Philippians 2. And all that he's done to go to the cross and suffer all the shame and humiliation that he did. And he did that on our behalf. And that it's that love between the Father and the Son that invites us in, that makes it all possible. And it's that act together of working towards our redemption that makes the love flow between the Father and the Son. It's as we ponder that, give space to be quiet with that, and walk with Jesus, in a sense, to the cross again. The Spirit uses that to awaken us with a new heart of compassion. As we realize all that Jesus has done for us, and all who he is and what he invites us into, it awakens our hearts to say, yes, I want to live for God's mission as well. I want my life to be connected with God's story as well. I'm willing to deny myself, to die to my old selfish ways where it was all just about me, which never produced any fruit or joy anyway, and say, God, I want to do life your way. I'm not in control of my life. I've tried to manage it and I just make it a mess. Life hasn't worked out the way I thought anyway. And so, God, I want to trust you and I want to surrender to you and in you, Father, to experience abundant life. Jesus is the Good Shepherd, because it's the beauty of his love for us that awakens us to follow him and surrender our lives to him. God bless you, Good News Chapel. I'll see you soon. Amen.